Today I have the pleasure to introduce Venerable Jinasiri to you. As Majina comes originally from Australia. Yeah, it doesn't look like it, but yeah, indeed. So I comes from Australia, but has ordained 13 years ago in Sri Lanka and spent much of his monk's life in Sri Lanka, also other places. And quite interesting actually in the same tradition as also where Venerable Devamita comes from, Venerable Sumana in the Kaldua tradition. But also he stayed a lot of time in seclusion and exploring and maintaining the very traditional lifestyle of a forest monk, often going on long charikas, long hikes. So if you want to get to know traditional, not just traditional, but also very simple style of living the monk's life, as Majina is a very good example for that. And as you know, when you go on charika, when you're out there in the open, you can't take a lot of property with you because you have to carry everything. So it's a very excellent practice in frugality, simplicity. So I'm very happy that as Majina joined our community a couple of weeks ago. And as it's sometimes the case, sometimes you don't know, a newcomer comes, how will he fit into our community? But he has been a perfect match, I almost have to say. The main reason, or one of the reasons, as Majina is a very friendly, nice monk, easy to get along with, but also another reason is what unites us is our passion for the early Buddhist teachings, for the Dhamma, for the suttas. So especially it is not so easy to find, even nowadays, there's so much emphasis on later texts, or customs and traditions, commentaries, Abhidhamma, and quite nice sometimes also to get a monk from somewhere. We never know, and suddenly a monk pops up. Very similar approach than what we are doing here, Bhante Akachita's style, or on lineage that we have here in SPS. So it was very nice to have a monk come, being very much on the same page here. Without much further ado, I would like to introduce Majina, and also hopefully to share some Dhamma with us.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. With permission, I shall speak. So, good morning. As Bhante said, my name is Jinasiri, and I was ordained in Sri Lanka about 13 years ago. I'm from Australia. I was born in Australia. My parents are Chinese, so that's why I look Chinese. Unfortunately, I don't speak Chinese. They call this being ABC, Australian-born Chinese. So maybe in Malaysia you call them MBC. Malaysian-born Chinese. So actually I don't know so much about Chinese culture. And also I don't know so much about Australian culture. And nor do I know very much about Sri Lankan culture. So I'm one of these floating entities that has no home. So it was very natural for me to take up the homeless life and to spend a lot of time alone trying to figure out what life is all about. That was my experience of growing up as a child. I couldn't understand what people were saying around me. And I have no mother tongue. So when people talk about having a mother tongue, what they mean is the language that their mother taught to them. And it's where they feel at home. So often we spend time overseas speaking a second language like English, and then we come back to our own family and we speak the language that our mother spoke to us, and then we feel like, yes, I belong here. I feel safe. I feel comfortable. But actually, I never had anything like that. Everywhere I've always gone, I've always had to watch other people very, very carefully and try to work out what they're doing as fast as I can, and then do my very best to fit in as best as I can inside constantly changing environments. So the Buddha's teaching about samsara became very, very natural to me, that actually none of us have a real home, that all of us have been wandering around. But sometimes we get more of a sense of home because we've been there for a while. So I've been living in Sri Lanka for 4 years, and what I've observed about Sri Lankan people, because it's a very old culture and an island, that if you're Sri Lankan, you've probably been Sri Lankan for the last minimum 5 lifetimes. And more likely you've been Sri Lankan for the last 100 lifetimes. So the language becomes very, very natural to you. The culture is very natural. You speak very fast. Other people understand what you're saying. There's a particular way of talking in Sri Lankan, a way of phrasing things, and everybody's settled upon that. Even a little bit different, it comes across as very, very strange. So this concept of being at home, as opposed to the idea of being homeless, is an idea that has to be explored in order for us to, of course, become enlightened. For the Buddha gave up his home in order to become a wandering monk. But not just that, of course, that's quite a high goal. And ordinary people have other things on their mind. They have on their mind how to feel safe in this constantly changing world. So you're in Malaysia now, it's a Muslim country, you're a Chinese minority. Even inside the Chinese community, there's so many different languages, so many different cultures. We're in a modern time where families are breaking down. We're not quite sure how we can get along with our own children, how we can get along with our mother and father, how we can get along with our brothers and sisters. It seems like no matter where we go, we seem to be living with people with completely different cultures and different ideas and language. And how can we feel safe? In that just ordinary way that people used to feel safe when they came home from work or came home from school, and they were sitting down at the dinner table. And then, okay. Now I'm in a place where people have the same ideas, the same religion, the same perspective on life, same language, same culture, same habits, same idioms. And so, I feel safe. I have a refuge. Yeah? Buddhang saranang gacchami. We take refuge here every week. So the idea of the refuge seems to come like an opposite idea to the idea of being anagarika, being a homeless one. Or in the Pali, the idiom is agarasma anagaryam pambachati, that we go forth from the home life into homelessness. When we normally talk about Buddhism, we talk about non-attachment, and non-ego and letting go. So it makes sense for us to let go of our identity, let go of our home, let go of our comfort zone, so that we can go along with the flow of life. That's true at the higher levels. The more skillful you become as a practitioner, the more you're able to adapt to different circumstances and let go of your own way of doing things and do just what works for yourself and everybody inside the context. But we can't go there straight away, can we? We can't expect babies to just be able to get up, walk out of the home with 3 robes and a bowl and to be able to adapt to every circumstance that they meet. Yeah? If we don't get trained first in some sort of habit pattern, which is useful, practical and strong, then letting go makes us feel disorientated. It makes us feel very unsafe and stressed out all the time. Now, this is the problem of modern life. So we're constantly told that we need to update. We need to be flexible. We need to be competitive in the international market. So because the international market is always changing and always updating its computers and its software and its systems to the next ISO system, then we're told that we need to be superior human beings by constantly going with the flow and updating ourselves along with the system. The problem is it's incredibly stressful. Yeah? We actually feel like we have no home in a bad way. So, of course, if you're a homeless person on the streets, which is a very different life to the homeless life of a good monk, that's not a fun way to live. That's not a happy or safe or conducive environment for practicing the Dhamma. And unfortunately, this is what's happened to all of us. We're dislocated from our countries. We have to speak different languages. We're not even sure about our own history. We're not even sure about our own culture. And so, from childhood, we feel stressed out. We have no safe place to be. We have no refuge. And that's why you find in modern countries, even children have mental illnesses. Children are reporting that they're stressed out and anxious. Something that you just would not have found even 50 years ago in Malaysia. People, if they were Chinese, they hung out with Chinese people. If they were Malays, they hung out with Malay people. It was a Chinese workplace, it was a Chinese school. You may not have known so much about the world, and there are disadvantages to that, but you did have the advantage at the very least. You were somewhat ignorant, but you were less stressed out. And you had a place that you could go home to every day and say, okay, this is where I belong. These are my people. So essentially we're in this circumstance now where the world expects too much from us, and we expect too much from ourselves. If you're an anagami and you have no greed or hatred, no greed for sensual pleasures and no ill will towards anybody whatsoever, those are completely rooted out for the anagami, then it's very easy to adapt to different circumstances very, very quickly. Yeah? Because you hardly have any attachments whatsoever. But it really is unreasonable to expect an ordinary person who isn't even a stream enterer, who doesn't even have right view yet, but is working to get there as a Buddhist, to be able to adapt so quickly to all these changing circumstances. So, what can we do about that? Well, number one, if you're feeling stressed out about life, don't think there's something wrong with you. Don't believe the modern psychological gurus who say that you have it in you if you just make a determination and you work hard enough and you're willing to train to become a successful modern person who can keep up with the times. Yes, some people can do that, like maybe 2% of the population. They've got very high karma. They've done a lot of work in past lives. And so they're very capable, and you see them. In particular, we see them on television, right? And we read about them in the magazines, and we see them on the movie screens. And then we get the impression that we all should be that way. Yeah, we see Superman movies, Batman movies, we see models every day on the billboards, and we think we should all be that strong, we should all be that smart, we should all be that beautiful. Whereas the reality is that, well, actually, only like 1% of people are that beautiful. 1% of people are that smart, and 1% of people are that strong. So what about the rest of us? Yeah? If we're being asked to do things that actually, no matter how hard we try, we can't do, then that's just going to make us feel anxious all the time, like we're not good enough. It's unreasonable. So you have to remember that the Buddha's teaching is reasonable. It's realistic. It's about the way things really are, yatha bhutang. Now, a reasonable thing to say about ordinary human beings is that they need a home. They need a place to belong. They need a family, they need a culture that is stable. They need to be able to go back to the same old patterns of behavior, of food, of people, of dress, and then use that as a base to go towards homelessness. This is why we take refuge. This is why even we homeless ones, we monks, we belong to the Sangha. Yeah, so of course we leave our families, but even then the Buddha gave a lot of special allowances for the way that we interact with our own family members. So we can ask for things from our own family members and we can't ask for things from other people. But even then, we also have another home, which is with the Sangha. We have brothers and sisters. We have fathers and mothers. We have students. We have daughters and sons. All of us inside of the Sangha. We have a culture inside the Sangha. In fact, what you find inside the Sangha is that it's the most stable culture for the last 2,500 years. And the most stable culture existing today in this crazy world of 2023. Because we've got the Vinaya, and the good monks, the serious monks, the authentic monks, were very, very serious about the Vinaya. Learning how to maintain not just the rules, but the culture that existed 2,500 years ago. And that's what makes the Sangha a refuge for you. You shouldn't think when you look at the Sangha, they're just so old-fashioned, right? Being old-fashioned is a really good thing, actually. That's why the Buddha set up the Sangha. It's like a boat in the middle of the ocean. For it to be safe, it has to be anchored to the ground. Yeah? Now, what happens if the anchor keeps moving? Because it's not heavy enough. Then the boat will just go with the winds and the waves, and it's not safe at all. There's no point having the anchor. But if the anchor is heavy and doesn't move, then yes, the boat will move, but not too far. Will go as far as the rope extends. So the boat knows that it's safe inside a safe harbor. So in the same way, it's really important to associate with good old-fashioned monks, like Bhante here. He's very, very strict with these students about Vinaya. Very, very strict about even the small Vinaya rules, because it's all about the Sangha culture. And that way you can start to retie your cultures. Chinese people, Australian people, whoever's Buddhist, you can rediscover your culture by associating with the Sangha and just understanding what is important about old-fashioned things. What is important about tradition? Of course, tradition is never perfect, but if you go to good Sangha members and good Sangha community, then you can extract the principles of what a good tradition is, then apply it to your own family, to your own communities, to your own cultural traditions. And then re-establish for yourself, not just a refuge inside the Sangha, that is the monastic community, but inside the Parasa, inside the lay community. You get some stability inside life. You don't have to update all the time because your traditions are good enough for you. They're kept alive and kept meaningful. You can rely upon it. You can go home somewhere and have a home language, a mother tongue. Then you feel strong on the inside, and step by step, you can practice the Buddha's teachings, let go of your attachments, become more and more like a homeless one, and get fully enlightened. So that's my Dhamma talk for today.